Hey friends, welcome. This is Kenny Jahng with the Church Tech Today video kickoff. We are doing a series of video interviews because you asked for it. You wanted more content, resources, insights from practitioners, not just gurus, practitioners who are actually in the trenches doing digital ministry, church online, and other things. So this is just one of those things I think we're going to see where this leads. We'd love for you to chime in. And so before we begin, just do us a favor and let us know in the comments below where you're from, what church you're with, and what you're doing with Church Online. So that's the first thing. As you do that, I'm going to welcome our first guest, Andy Mage. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thanks, Kenny. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me to be here.
Andy, now you are the digital pastor over at Bay Hope Church in Tampa, Florida. Let's just get the digits out there. What's the URL? How can we find your Church Online ministry?
Absolutely. We're at bayhope.com and we are at youtube.com/bayhopechurch. All of our socials at Bay Hope Church. We're doing a lot. Our worship team's at Bay Hope Worship. If you want to, they're on Spotify. They've got thousands of followers and all of that stuff. So go look them up.
We got to talk about Spotify some other day. Okay, so
I'm in.
Before we get to all the nerdy stuff that we're going to talk about today, share with us a little about just the background of the ministry. Describe what Bay Hope is actually like. If I'm going to, visit you, what am I going to encounter? What type of church is it? And then what's your specific role on the team there?
Sure. Yeah. Bay Hope is a United Methodist church from way back. Been going on 30, 40 years now. The church itself went through a rebrand maybe 8 or 10 years ago into what it is now at Bay Hope Church. And the church itself actually was broadcasting live services for about 10 years before I came on staff. I've been on staff for just over 2 years. I was actually a worship pastor for 10 years. And Kenny, I know you're in New Jersey. I actually lived in Jersey. I lived in South Jersey for about 3 years.
Nice.
Cape May, the Ocean City area.
People don't believe it, but Jesus loves Jersey.
Sort of. He loved Summers Point and he loved Ocean City. Outside of that, it was kind of barren. But so I was a worship pastor. They brought me on as the digital pastor. And as they were streaming, they saw that they were getting a following, and there was, a couple thousand people that were attending, quote unquote, every single Sunday. And they said, man, we need a pastor over this. And so they put something out there and I applied, and here we are 2 years later, post COVID, still breathing.
Nice.
So our church is trying to be with the times in terms of streaming. So we have a very large online community. And that's honestly, I love that. I love getting to engage with everybody. The problem with that as well is that some of our engagement tools are not the best yet.
Right.
We're trying through, Alter and kind of some other things through YouTube and really two-way communication instead of churches just yelling at you, broadcast announcements and all that stuff. We're trying. So trying to be the pastor of a lot of people is tough in that regard, but man, it's so rewarding.
We're talking Church Online today, digital ministry on the forefront. Tell us a little bit about Church Online. So what's the format? Do you have live services, simulated live, on demand? Where are you streaming? When are the services? Is it like, and maybe I'll get into a little debate with you, like some other Church Online pastors, like, are you the church of Netflix where you just have unintended video streams and you call that church? So we'll get into that, but just show us a little bit about, what is Church Online to you in the community that you're trying to reach?
Sure. Yeah. Church Online started as just streaming live services like every church. And so we were up until about 2.5 years ago, the church was just streaming 9:30 and 11 every single Sunday. We had a Saturday night service, and then we would stream occasional big events, youth kickoffs and, Wednesday night type Bible studies and all that other stuff. When I got there, though, I kind of started to see like there was an actual community of people that wanted to be there. So I played around with Sim Live, never really did anything. And about Christmas time of 2019, I landed on the idea of let's just turn everything on demand. So still keep our live services. Let's kind of make a hybrid of live services for those that want it, and then an on-demand atmosphere that offers, yes, kind of that live sort of window into a Sunday service, but also the more made for small screens, made for cameras type interaction.
Yes.
that was in December of 2019. We started going that way. We've got an amazing creative team and an amazing sort of tech team. And they were way more equipped than I think I ever thought. And so they actually started building on an app, though they were working on an app, but we were building on an app that was going to, quote unquote, be you said Netflix. We wanted to be the Netflix of church, where we had pieces of content that were, I would be able to watch viewing habits. And so you watch something on this, and then I could serve up videos to you. And then if you went this way, it was almost, I called it in my notes, a passive discipleship, so that I, as the pastor, could insert myself at certain places and say, hey, it looks like you're struggling with this, or it looks like you need this. Can I help you? But other than that, just letting them go down the path and really engage with the church, really engage with the community. We're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Shop, just like every church in the world right now. We're slowly rolling in Altar Live, which I'm super excited about. That's a whole other discussion. There's a whole lot of awesomeness going on there. But COVID hit, and we had to stop all of those plans and immediately turn our staff of 100 into a staff of about 10. And then we basically just built a TV studio, and we were broadcasting live 4 to 6 times a day for a long time. And it was a grind. And yet we heard stories from a ton of people saying they'd never felt more connected to the church than those times. And I'm sure you've talked to however many online.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's not an uncommon experience, but that is quite amazing, right? I was coaching a church here in Jersey that they turned again, like a TV studio. They were broadcasting from, I think, 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day, 7 days a week. And again, you're reaching so many new people, different people.
Sure.
So that's great. So I think with all of this increasing of surface area, different, more opportunities for people to engage with your church, right? The question always then comes to, like, are you reaching more people? How many people are you reaching? And so I think that's the point of today's conversation, is let's nerd out on the question of just metrics.
Yeah.
Like, how do you measure what you're doing? So can you talk to us a little bit about, like, and I think you have different platforms, so it might be different for each one, but I think you're on Shop, you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook. Those are the 3 main channels that you guys are broadcasting right now, right?
Yeah.
So how do you approach even that, like aggregating all the data? I think is a challenge for so many churches. This is a, constant iterating, evolving, sometimes backtracking conversation, right? I'm sure you've had many conversations in the office. So share with us right now, what's your latest? How are you tracking? And what's your, like, I would say, what's your top 1, 2, or 3 metric that you pay attention to on a regular basis?
Sure. Yeah. You're right. It is an ever evolving thing. And I think when I first started, it was very much like, I got to look at all the metrics. I got to get a spreadsheet of all the things, and I'm going to track it. And I got tired of that. And then COVID hit, and I just stopped caring. And I actually wrote a blog about this that was just like, hey, stop worrying so much about the numbers and start worrying about the mission of the church. And the mission of the church is to reach the lost. And for our church mission is to continue to make disciples. Every church mission is, but ours is to connect people to a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And so the only way I was able to track that, obviously, was through these little numbers and then through anecdotes. The numbers that I have eventually settled on looking at for everything right now, I'm looking at average watch time. So average stream time. And that's a live stream, but that also goes into any piece of content. I'm looking at a % of how long you watched our video podcast or our story or our whatever. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, on YouTube specifically, playbacks for live videos, just playbacks, not views. With the theory being that person clicked that live thing, and that number going up or down is going to also correlate into that number kind of on the average watch time. And I can actually watch that graph bump and go down. So average watch time, those are really the 2. I'm looking at, and in Facebook, I'm looking at peak live viewers because they do surface that. YouTube's kind of bad on surfacing peak live. So I'm looking at those 3 in particular, with the thought being, especially, and I don't know how you feel about the peak live thing, but if I had 100 people in a room at a church service and then 20 of them walked out, I'm going to count it as 100 people were there for the church service. And so if I'm trying to accurately report something, I'm going to report that 100, not 80. So that's kind of where I landed. I used to have some really convoluted sort of formulas. I would take like I had a 10-minute base, and then I would talked to Tyler Sansom, brilliant guy. And he had this sort of infographic thing. I was like, this is great. And then I hate algebra. And so I just stopped doing it, because honestly, all that matters is you as a pastor, pick a base point, just pick something. And obviously you don't want to pick surface views. You want to pick something that's going to represent a good number.
Yeah.
And then you're going to want to track that either going up or down. So that's where we landed.
Are you looking at anything in terms of geographies of who's in your driving distance of your church physical buildings versus like other states, other countries, et cetera? Are you separating that out at all?
No, I'm not, simply because obviously, like most churches, the vast majority of our people that watch are within an hour or so of our church. And that was during COVID. Before I was, when I was nerding out over everything, I was saying, yeah, man, we got 15 people watching in Germany today, and 12 people watching in the Philippines, and 3 from Estonia. They could be bots. I don't know.
Right.
And that type of thing. I stopped doing that. I've thought about doing that, but what I have found to be better is when you start giving shout outs. So I'll stand up in front of a camera and start giving shout outs. And hey, Eric's from Brazil. Eric, thank you so much for watching from Brazil. I watch as the chat kind of fills up. Oh, we're in Copenhagen, and we're across the pond in the UK, that type of thing. I probably should track that, but I'm kind of lazy.
So, and then how often are you looking at these numbers? Is it a monthly thing, quarterly thing, daily thing? Is it Sunday right after the service? Where in that workflow are you looking at numbers?
Sure. Monday morning, every Monday morning, I'm pulling all the data from the last week. So I have to report, since we are United Methodist Church, I do have to report attendance, which is always a sticking point, but it is what it is, just kind of the thing. And so I'll pull that, and then I'll pull all of our previous 7 days of YouTube viewing and Facebook viewing. The Facebook one usually just gets put in the recycle bin as quick as I can look at it, just because I don't like looking at Facebook numbers. And honestly, we've been leaning into YouTube a lot. We've watched our followers, or our YouTube subscribers, skyrocket over the last year and change, even before COVID, because I started leaning into SEOifying everything and tagging everything and using TubeBuddy to make sure this looked good and this thing looked good and all that. So I care more about those numbers than anything else.
Gotcha. Side note, are you using YouTube Shorts or the community tab yet for YouTube?
We've used it maybe 3 times. I still am treading water on that. I haven't seen anything that shows me that it actually changes the algorithm in your favor. If there is a piece of data out there, I'd love to look at it, because I'd love to see how it affects. But for us right now, our team we have a big team, but we also kind of have a small team in terms of social media and in terms of digital presence. There's really only, I think, 4 of us, and 2 of us in the digital department, and one of them is only part-time. So we kind of got to hedge our bets with things that we know are going to work. Yeah,
that sounds right. So in terms of the actual reporting, who are you personally pulling out the reports, and then are you manually going to every single platform, or are you using some aggregator, data analytics tool like, Dash This or Oviond or something like that? Or are you just, logging in and going into a Google Sheet or something?
Old school, logging in, putting the numbers, copy paste into a Google Sheet. It's honestly it sounds stupid, but it's very meditative for me. I literally just put Spotify on, and I'll put my release radar on, listen to some new things, and it only takes 20 minutes or so to throw everything. I got formulas for everything anyway, so it just
gotcha. No, that's great. I think people are always curious of how other people do this stuff. And so you put it into a Google Sheet. Who else sees it? Is the senior pastor looking at it? Executive pastor? Is there other people, other teams? And how often do you guys look at that together and make discussions?
Sure. So our leadership structure is organized into senior pastor, Pastor Matthew, and then he's got executive directors under him, 4 EDs, and then he's got kind of the campus pastors floating in a little bubble off here. And then under the EDs are directors. So the senior pastor can look at that anytime he wants. We have a one-on-one every week, and so we'll talk, 30,000 foot view. The EDs are the ones that'll start to hash out a little bit, especially the ED of creative, and really the chief executive director, who's kind of chief of staff of everybody. We're the ones that'll hash out numbers. We'll do stuff depending, like we'll have tune-up meetings as needed. Our creative director actually has given us, he's the one that will look at them quite frequently, because he gave us a charge really at the beginning of the year and said, hey, our mission is to reach 30,000 people by 2030. Here's the things we got to hit. Let's go. And so he's the one that's constantly tracking those numbers, which is good. It's always good to have a goal. I end up just throwing those numbers into head counts in Planning Center, which is what we use for church management. And everybody and their mother who has access to people in head counts in Planning Center can look at that if they want to.
That sounds great. And then, this is a potentially contentious topic, Andy.
Let's go.
Multipliers. So, what we know for sure that, like, my family watches church online on Sundays. There's 4 of us. There's 4 bodies in the room, but it's one IP address, one login view. And even if it is, the playback or even the peak live numbers, etc., it's just one. How do you account for that? Many, digital people are using these things called multipliers to, somewhat accurately be better at representing who actually is watching. Are you using it? Have you used it? Where are you in that process?
We currently use a multiplier. I am currently trying to phase it out. Yeah, I know. I'm going backwards. Well, I think it's going forwards. Here's the thing. We used to use a 0.8 multiplier before COVID. And that was based on empirical surveys that were taken. And it was a little pop-up would come up on Shop. Hey, how many people are watching with you? Okay, cool. And it was 0.8, which is very small. It could have been, I think it was supposed to be 1.2. I wanted to be a little bit more conservative because I'm a pessimist by nature.
Just to be clear, what you're saying is that if there was actually 100 people on that number,
yes,
it's 0.8 in addition for every single one person. You're not counting them as 2 people. It's 0.8 more.
Yes, so it's 1.8 technically.
Yeah. So it's almost double. You're almost doubling the head count, basically.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And so that was pre-COVID. During COVID, we bumped that up a little bit. It went to 2.2-ish or something like that. And
was that based on the survey or the pop-up?
That was based on another survey. Yeah. So about, I'd say a month into COVID, we ran another survey just because it was like, hey, I know I can see that there's 6,000 people watching right now. Yeah. Come on, this number's got to be a little higher. And I was a pessimist, but not that much of a pessimist. And then as we hit October and November of 2020, when things in Florida really started to kind of spring wide open, again, we sort of moved back to, instead of 1.8, it was 1.7. So we're currently resting at a 1.7 multiplier.
That's so interesting.
Again, a survey, we did a
Kudos
survey.
To you. I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, if you had a 2.2 multiplier, if you kept it, you just look good. Like Pastor Andy, dude, he's killing it.
Yeah, that guy's crushing it. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Number one, everybody knows that I didn't invent coronavirus. And so so all those people are coming back to church. Number two, we didn't grow the church that much, which was interesting because the church did grow during COVID. And we've watched now that as people have come back, we're kind of split down the middle, 50-50, still online, coming in person. And the church grew. And so it's crazy. And we even shrunk our multiplier and the church grew. So we're just kind of praising God in the midst of that. I am of the mind, though, I want to get rid of multiplier entirely. I just want to look strictly at IP addresses and use that number because I am, again, of the mindset of we're going back, Delta variant notwithstanding, we're going back to I'm going to hold my phone up and I'm going to watch church on my phone. You don't have 2 people watching it on your phone. If I want to do a multiplier, I'll look in some of our things. I'll look at who's using the YouTube app, who's using, I can look at all of those things, but frankly, we're not there yet. I'm fighting other battles first.
Gotcha. It's that question about the multiplier is always interesting. And I love hearing, at least in this conversation, that you're being very thoughtful about it and trying to, strategically represent what it would be in real life offline and then figure out like what it is online. So that's great. Now, if you had advice for a new digital ministry staffer who's getting into this? Because again, as the needs grow, people are coming back. People are pushed to the digital side, right? Everyone's like, how are you going to justify all these people that worked in kids ministry or all these other things that were offline? Everyone went into digital, and now everyone's being pulled back. And so there might be people that are just now taking on more responsibilities. What's some advice for someone in that position regards to, especially like how are you supposed to figure out this whole numbers thing? Like how do you, first of all, how do you measure it? Like what's that first step in thinking for the context of my own ministry? And then second, how do you like explain it to the staff and team relative to offline?
Sure. I think to answer the second one first is easier because you need to have buy-in from everybody else that your number actually matters. And that's going to involve you as pastor, ministry worker, leader, whatever in the digital space saying, look how viable this is. And all you got to do is pull up the Home Depot number, the age-old Home Depot story of how Home Depot grew, and all of those stories, pull those up and say, we are a digital first world. Regardless of what you think, digital first is where we're headed. It doesn't mean it's the only thing. There is a personal thing. So you need buy-in from all your people. Then you as ministry leader, worker, whatever, can go and pull whatever you feel is relevant. In kind of the digital tool, the reporting tools that we have right now, views don't matter because you can buy views for $5. You can have 1,000 views for $5. It is what in your heart of hearts as a pastor, the thing that's going to matter the most is time spent. And that's really what you do as a pastor. You spend time with people. And so looking at that in your own context and saying, okay, cool. Maybe I don't look at a full, if I do an hour service, maybe I'm only going to say I'm going to do a percentage instead of an actual number, or I'm going to do a ratio instead of a number. However, whatever distinction you want to make there, time spent is the big thing that I think more and more people need to look at. And I think we're finally seeing that next wave of people throwing off all these misconceptions about views and everything, and finally starting to say, okay, let's get to the heart of what it means to be an online ministry.
Love it. This is just one of those conversations I want to keep going on and on and on, but we're at a time for a close right now, and we'll have to have you back on for sure.
Definitely.
Because I think there's so many other questions. I want to talk about like how you're doing groups online, how you're doing sacraments, all that kind of stuff. I think is just things that we can really look forward to discussing if you're willing to come back and join us.
100%.
In the meantime, if someone wants to learn more about your ministry and connect with you further at your church, what's the best way someone could do that?
Sure. Yeah. Bay Hope Church, obviously, bayhope.com is the best way to get there. You can hit me up on my socials at The Real Andy Mage. You can hit Bay Hope Church up on their socials. I see all of those, even if we have our social media manager looking at it. I see all those things. Any one of our socials at Bay Hope Church. I'd love to talk and hang out and connect. We're doing a whole lot of great things that I would love to have more eyeballs on and have more input on, honestly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. And for you listening in today to this conversation, I'd love for you to just chime in and let us know what resonated in today's conversation. What's the top 1, 2, or 3 topics that we touched upon? And what other topics you would love to hear that we cover in this space? Because I think this is really what we're trying to do here at Church Tech today, is really help equip you and connect you with the community of thousands of other peers just like you, going through all of this innovation that we have in front of us. So please chime in. Let me know what's of interest for you, for us to go deeper. And if you want to come on to the show and discuss and talk shop, just like Andy was generous to do with his time here, reach out to me at Church Tech today, and we'll get you scheduled for a conversation here. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll check you out here the next time here with Church Tech Today.